Israel seeks to evacuate Palestinians jammed into a southern Gaza city ahead of an expected invasion. Pakistan's ex-PM Sharif says he will seek a coalition government after trailing jailed rival Khan. Ukraine's new army chief signals new momentum, but huge problems stand in the way. Today is Saturday, February 10th, 2024, and this is the Dunkley Report. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he has ordered the military to prepare a plan for the evacuation of the population of the southern Gaza city of Rafah ahead of an expected ground invasion. Netanyahu made the announcement Friday following international criticism of Israel's plan to invade the crowded city on Egypt's border. Israel says, Rafah is the last remaining Hamas stronghold, and it needs to send in troops to complete its war plan against the Islamic militant group. The UN estimates 1.4 million Palestinians have crammed into Rafah after fleeing fighting elsewhere in Gaza. Netanyahu says he's asked security officials for a double plan to evacuate civilians and to collapse remaining Hamas militant units. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif says he will seek to form a coalition government after his party trailed independent candidates backed by his imprisoned rival Imran Khan in parliamentary election results. Sharif told supporters Friday he was sending his brother to meet other party leaders to invite them to join a coalition. Nawaz Sharif had rejected the idea of an alliance a day earlier, saying he wanted a single party running Pakistan. But he changed his position after results showed candidates backed by Khan leading in the vote count, a surprise given claims by Khan supporters and a national rights body that the balloting was manipulated against him. Ukraine's new army chief says his immediate goals include improving the rotation of troops out of the front lines and harnessing the power of new technology. Colonel Oleksandr Syrskyi made the comments on Friday, a day after President Volodymyr Zelenskyy put him in charge of the battlefield campaign against Russia's invasion. Syrskyi, who previously was the commander of Ukraine's ground forces, said that new tasks are on the agenda. Though he provided little detail, his remarks were in line with Zelenskyy's stated aim of renewal of the armed forces and adopting a fresh approach to the fight. But Ukraine's biggest problems remain manpower shortage and the inadequate supply of Western weapons in its fight against Russia. A small group of families of Israelis, who are hostages of Hamas, believes that only continued Israeli military pressure on the militant group, rather than a deal, will free the captives. They argue that the price to be paid for a deal, including the release of large numbers of Palestinian militants by Israel, would endanger Israel. In the future, such views put them at odds with the vast majority of the families who are pressing the Israeli government for an immediate deal to bring their loved ones home. Those holding the minority view say it's hard for critics to understand how they can put ideology above the natural response to seek their relatives' safe return. A small group of families of Israelis, who are hostages of Hamas, believes that only continued Israeli military pressure on the militant group, rather than a deal, will free the captives. They argue that the price to be paid for a deal, including the release of large numbers of Palestinian militants by Israel, would endanger Israel. in the future. Such views put them at odds with the vast majority of the families who are pressing the Israeli government for an immediate deal to bring their loved ones home. Those holding the minority view say it's hard for critics to understand how they can put ideology above the natural response to seek their relatives' safe return. The director of the main UN aid agency for Palestinians says Israeli restrictions are preventing food for 1.1 million people from reaching war-battered Gaza. Tens of thousands in the war-battered enclave are struggling with starvation. The head of the agency told reporters Friday that its Israeli bank account was frozen and that authorities warned off the Israeli contractor. That means more than 1,000 containers of, that means 1,049 containers of rice, flour, chickpeas, sugar, and cooking oil are stuck, even as a quarter of families in Gaza face catastrophic hunger. Separately, the UN Food Agency warned of possible famine as early as May. Prince Harry has reached an out-of-court settlement with a tabloid newspaper publisher that invaded his privacy with phone hacking and other illegal snooping. Attorney David Sherborne said on Friday that Mirror Group newspapers had agreed to pay Harry substantial costs and damages and would make an interim payment of £400,000 or $505,000. Harry was awarded £140,000, about $177,000, in damages in December, after the judge found that phone hacking was widespread and habitual at Mirror Group newspapers in the 1990s, and that executives at the papers covered it up. Harry vowed that his mission to rein in the British press would continue. An abrupt shutdown of Atlantic Ocean currents that could put large parts of Europe in a deep freeze is looking a bit more likely and closer than before, as a new complex computer simulation finds a cliff-like tipping point looming in the future. A study in Friday's Science Advances finds a long-feared nightmare scenario, triggered by Greenland's ice sheet. Melting from global warming still is at least decades away, if not longer, but maybe not the centuries that it once seemed. A collapse of the current would change weather worldwide, because it means a shutdown of one of key, the climate and ocean forces of the planet. World-renowned conductor Seiji Ozawa has died of heart failure at his home in Tokyo, his management office said Friday. He was 88. The acclaimed Japanese maestro led the Boston Symphony Orchestra from 1973 to 2002, longer than any other conductor in the orchestra's 128-year history. From 2002 to 2010, he was music director of the Vienna State Opera. Ozawa exerted enormous influence over the BSO during his tenure. His celebrity attracted famous performers like Yo-Yo Ma. He won 2 Emmys for television work with the orchestra. Pope Francis has met with Argentine pilgrims who are in town for this weekend's canonization of the first female saint from his home country. Francis blasted what he called the radical individualism infecting today's society during the audience Friday. Francis held up as a model instead the 18th century Argentine layman, lovingly known as Mama Antula, who ministered to the poor and helped keep Jesuit spirituality alive in Argentina after the Pope's own religious order was suppressed. On Sunday, Francis will canonize Mama Antula in a ceremony that will also mark his first meeting with Argentina's new libertarian president, Javier Milei. Today's news was reported by the Associated Press. This has been the International News for Saturday, February 10th, 2024. Thanks again for joining us here at the Dunkley Report.